Imagine you are the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar technology firm. You have just spent over $500 million expanding your operations onto a completely new continent.
Right, an absolute fortune.
Exactly. You have hired the staff, you built the distribution hubs, and, your marketing campaign has been blanketing the capital city for a solid month.
The stakes are incredibly high at that point.
Oh, absolutely. And then launch day arrives, and you realize something horrifying. The local telecommunications infrastructure makes your flagship product literally impossible to use.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the product does not just underperform, it is physically incompatible with the nation's grid. So what do you do?
Well, you realize very quickly that global business is not just, domestic business, but bigger. It is an entirely different operational universe with consequences that can basically bankrupt a firm overnight.
Today, we are tearing down that illusion. Welcome to the Deep Dive. And if you are listening right now, specifically, if you are an MBA student staring down the barrel of an upcoming exam on Unit 10 International Business Strategy, we are talking directly to you.
We definitely are.
We know the pressure's on, and we know that reading textbook chapters can sometimes feel like trying to memorize a dictionary. So think of this session as your ultimate, immersive, strategic war room.
I like that framing.
Yeah. We have taken your source material, this incredibly dense text on how massive global corporations make their highest stakes decisions. And we are going to dissect the actual, nuts and bolts mechanics behind those decisions.
Because the goal here is synthesis, but more importantly, comprehension. We aren't just going to recite definitions to you. We are going to explore the friction, from the initial motives of profitability to the architectural realities of global expansion, all the way to the complex social contract of corporate social responsibility. By the time we conclude, you won't just remember these concepts, you will understand how to actually wield them as a future executive.
So if we look back at the earlier units in your MBA program, they likely covered the macro-level theories, grand international trade flows, government protectionism, the sweeping global economic environment.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that macro-level context is essentially the weather. But today, we're talking about how to build the ship.
Okay, I love that analogy.
Thanks. We are zooming in on the functional micro-level execution. How do the board of directors, the CEOs, and the general managers actually sit in a boardroom and formulate a strategy? How do they select an entry mode? And how do they physically design their organizational structures to ensure they don't, lose that hypothetical $500 million?
Let's start with the absolute foundation. Before a firm can even think about foreign currency exchange rates or global logistics, it has to define what it is actually trying to achieve.
Exactly.
Strategy is a word that gets thrown around boardrooms a lot, often as this lofty philosophical vision statement. But according to the sources, strategy is entirely pragmatic. It boils down to the specific, calculated actions that top-level managers take to fulfill very rigid goals.
Right. Strategy is action. It is the architectural blueprint of decisions designed to get a firm from its current state to a desired end state. The critical question for an executive, and frankly for your exam, is, what is that desired end state?
Well, my immediate instinct, and I think the instinct of almost anyone who has taken Business 101, is that the goal is pure profit. Maximize the profit. I mean, that is the whole point of capitalism.
You would certainly think so.
But the source text throws a massive curveball right at the beginning. It warns us not to assume profit is always the primary driver.
It is a very common analytical trap, actually. The reality of corporate governance is significantly more complicated. Very often, top management is actually pursuing sales maximization rather than pure profit maximization.
I have to pause there because on its face, that seems completely contradictory. Why on earth would a CEO care more about top-line sales volume than the actual bottom-line profit?
It does seem counterintuitive.
Right. Because if I sell $1 billion worth of goods, but only make $1 in profit, I am technically a massive success by the sales metric, but a total failure by the profit metric.
To understand this, we have to look at the human element of corporate governance. The sources outline 3 distinct reasons for this phenomenon. First, and perhaps most pragmatically for the individuals running the company, there is a very high correlation between managerial salaries, including bonuses, stock options, and other earnings, and the overall sales volume of the firm.
Okay, so it's essentially the agency problem, even if the text doesn't use that specific term. The manager's personal financial goals are intrinsically linked to growing the sheer size of the pie, rather than maximizing the nutritional value of each slice, so to speak. A CEO managing a $20 billion revenue company commands a massively higher salary than a CEO of a $200 million company, almost regardless of their respective profit margins.
Right, the sheer scale of operations dictates executive compensation.
That is wild.
And that scale is precisely the point. The second reason involves external financing. Banks, private equity firms, and other financial institutions are inherently risk-averse entities. They are overwhelmingly more eager to finance firms that demonstrate large and consistently growing sales.
Because banks don't necessarily care if your profit margin is 30% or 3%, as long as you have enough constant cash flow to service your debt.
That is exactly it.
High sales volume indicates market presence and momentum. If you have cash constantly moving through the registers, the bank feels their loan is secure.
Yep. Growing sales mask a lot of potential risk, which ties directly into the third reason for prioritizing sales maximization internal harmony. The sources explicitly state that personnel problems can be handled much more easily when sales are growing.
Wait, really? So instead of dealing with the friction of optimizing a stagnant company, you just outgrow the friction?
Precisely. Consider the internal politics of a stagnant or shrinking firm. When sales plateau, executives have to fight over a fixed budget.
Oh, I see.
If the marketing department wants more funding, it has to come at the expense of the R&D department. That breeds vicious internal politics, layoffs, and resentment.
Nobody wants to deal with that.
Right. However, when a company is rapidly expanding its sales, there are constant new promotions, entirely new departments being created, and expanding budgets to be allocated. Growth is basically a rising tide that masks a tremendous amount of internal friction.
So to maximize those sales, managers will push strategies like aggressively selling more products into existing markets or hunting for entirely new international markets to enter. But, we cannot ignore the other side of the ledger.
No, we cannot.
Profit maximization is still a fundamental, crucial goal. For the MBA exam, we need to understand exactly how the source defines this mechanically.
So profit maximization, or increasing profitability, is mathematically rooted in the firm's price-cost margin. For your exam, the formula is P minus C.
P minus C.
Got it. P represents the price the market is willing to pay, and C represents the cost of creating that product. The text defines profitability itself as the ratio of operational profit to total sales over a particular time period.
Okay, so as an executive, your mission is to violently widen that gap. You need P to go up and C to go down. Higher prices, lower costs.
Exactly.
It sounds incredibly simple in theory, but how does a firm actually execute that in reality? I mean, you can't just raise prices arbitrarily without losing customers, and you can only cut costs so far before you destroy the quality of your product.
This is where the engine of the company comes in. Research and development, or R&D. The sources detail the dual power of R&D in manipulating both sides of that equation simultaneously.
How so?
Well, R&D expenditure drives two distinct types of product innovation and process innovation.
Let's break those down. Product innovation seems fairly straightforward. This is, Apple inventing a new tier of the iPhone, or a pharmaceutical company creating a completely new drug formulation.
Correct. Product innovation increases product differentiation. It makes your offering unique, more desirable, or technologically superior.
Right.
When your product is highly differentiated, it fundamentally alters your pricing power. It allows you to increase the price. Consumers will gladly pay a premium for a superior or unique product because there are no direct substitutes. It drives the P up.
Oh, I see. But the other side is process innovation. And this feels like it has a ceiling. Process innovation is looking internally, finding faster, cheaper, or more efficient ways to manufacture that existing product.
Yes, it improves productivity. By streamlining the manufacturing line, automating logistics, or reducing material waste, process innovation inherently reduces the cost of goods sold. It drives the C down.
But surely you can only make a factory so efficient before you start cutting corners. There are physical limits to cost reduction.
There are limits, yes, but the combination of the two creates a compounding advantage. And the text makes a crucial point regarding R&D that you must understand for strategic analysis. High R&D acts as a massive entry barrier to competitors.
Oh, because if my firm is pouring billions into R&D, creating highly differentiated products and ultra-efficient automated manufacturing processes, a new competitor can't simply rent a warehouse and compete with me on day one.
Exactly.
They don't have the patents, the proprietary software, or the supply chain efficiency. My R&D spend effectively builds a moat around my profit rate.
It creates insurmountable economies of scale for new entrants. Now, we have sales maximization and profit maximization via the PC margin. But a firm is not a monolith. The sources note that there are secondary departmental goals that also drastically shape the overall strategy.
Right. Different departments have their own specific operational objectives that must roll up into the main strategic vision. The text mentions the production goal. This originates from the manufacturing side of the house.
That makes sense.
Their goal is the unbroken, smooth running of the production process. They want to avoid excess capacity, meaning they don't want a multi-million-dollar machine sitting idle for 3 days a week, and they want to strictly manage the waste of raw materials and worker time.
Then there is the inventory goal, which often acts as a point of internal conflict. The text describes it as originating from either the inventory department itself or as a tug of war between sales and production.
I can definitely see why. The sales department wants a massive, overflowing stock of finished goods ready in every market so they never have to tell a client, we are out of stock.
Right. They want to make the sale immediately.
Exactly. But the production and finance departments want just enough raw materials to keep the machines running without tying up hundreds of millions of the company's cash in warehouses full of depreciating inventory.
Balancing that tension is a key strategic imperative for general managers. Finally, there are share of the market goals. These generally originate from the sales and marketing departments.
The folks driving the ad campaigns.
Exactly. They drive the advertising campaigns and the market research programs, all designed to capture a progressively larger percentage of the overall consumer base, tying back into that initial desire for sales maximization.
So we have mapped out what the firm wants to achieve. We know the motives. But how does the physical anatomy of a company actually achieve this?
That is the big question.
If profitability requires widening that PC margin through innovation, how does the actual structure of the company's daily operations do the heavy lifting? This brings us to the concept of value creation activities.
The daily operation of a firm is essentially a series of interconnected value creation activities. The sources rigidly classify these into two distinct categories: primary activities and secondary activities. For your exam, you need to be able to categorize these perfectly and understand how they interact.
Let's use an analogy here. Think of a smartphone. You buy the phone for the apps, the camera, the social media, the messaging. Let's call the apps the primary activities.
I like where this is going.
These are the activities directly involved in creating the product, getting it to the buyer, and supporting it afterward.
Primary activities, as defined by the text, include production, marketing, sales, customer service, and R&D. If we map these back to the PC margin, efficient production technology directly lowers costs, pulling the C down.
Makes sense.
And then marketing and sales activities elevate the brand's perception, creating demand that justifies higher prices, pushing the P up.
Customer service plays a huge role here too, right? The text notes that offering services after the sale creates positive perceptions about the company's brand. If a company replaces a broken product, no questions asked, that builds incredible loyalty, which again allows for price premiums. We have already established R&D as the ultimate weapon for both price and cost. So those are the apps, the frontline activities, but then we have the secondary activities.
Right. In your smartphone analogy, the secondary activities are the operating system. You don't buy the phone for the operating system, but if the operating system crashes, none of the apps work.
That is a great way to put it.
The secondary activities are supportive. They do not physically build the product or sell it to the end consumer, but they are absolutely essential for the successful execution of the primary activities.
What exactly falls into this category for the exam?
The secondary activities include information systems, infrastructure, logistics, and human resource management.
Now, if I am a student, I might look at that list and think, okay, so secondary activities are just corporate overhead. The IT department, the HR complaints division, why should I, as a future strategic executive, care about them? Why view them as a core competitive advantage?
Viewing them merely as overhead is a catastrophic mistake. They are the unseen engines that make the primary activities scalable across a global landscape. Let's examine the specific example provided in your source material regarding HP, Dell, and ASUS.
These are massive, globally dominant electronics companies.
They are. The source highlights that these companies possess incredibly robust secondary information systems. These systems manage almost all of their operating processes globally.
So what does that actually mean in practice? It means Dell can track a single microchip from a fabrication plant in Taiwan through a final assembly line in Mexico, all the way to a desktop computer sitting in an office in Ohio.
Flawlessly.
And that flawless tracking allows them to operate with virtually zero excess inventory, saving them billions of dollars in warehousing costs.
Exactly. Without that secondary activity, the massive unseen information system, Dell couldn't possibly execute its primary activity of selling laptops efficiently.
Wow.
Logistics controls the physical diffusion of materials into intermediate and final products. Infrastructure includes the organizational structure, the control systems, and the culture of the firm. And human resource management ensures you have the talent capable of running this massive global machine.
So the strategic takeaway here, before we even look at a map of the world, is that a growing organization must analyze this exact breakdown of primary and secondary activities.
They have to.
It has to look in the mirror and identify its core competencies. What is the one specific activity they execute better than anyone else in the world? Is it their frontline R&D, or is it their backbone logistics network?
They must identify that core competency and use it as the foundational leverage for planning their international expansion strategy. You do not expand globally simply because the market is there. You expand because you can weaponize your core competency in a new geography.
Which brings us perfectly to the actual mechanics of crossing borders. The firm has mastered its value creation activities at home. It has widened its profit margin. Now it faces the lure of global expansion.
The economic drivers for this are undeniable. The text notes a positive relationship between the trade openness of an economy and new opportunities for a firm to expand.
Right.
Global trade leads to higher economic growth, which increases per capita income globally, which in turn boosts new business openings.
It is a massive virtuous cycle. If you go global, you expand your addressable market exponentially, which fulfills the mandate for sales maximization we talked about earlier.
Yes, exactly.
Furthermore, you can scour the entire planet for the most optimal locations to operate your production. You can hunt for low-cost raw materials or cheaper skilled labor to minimize that C in your profit equation. Plus, global competition naturally forces your firm to become more efficient or die.
Right.
But entering a foreign market introduces incredible opposing pressures.
This concept is perhaps the most critical analytical framework in the entire unit. When a firm decides to cross national boundaries, it is immediately subjected to two massive competing pressures: the pressure for cost reduction and the pressure to respond to local market nuances.
Imagine a massive strategic matrix. On the vertical axis, you have the pressure for cost reduction. Does the market demand you offer the absolute cheapest product possible? On the horizontal axis, you have the pressure for local responsiveness. Does the local culture, infrastructure, or government demand you customize your product specifically for them?
That is a great visualization.
Depending on where your firm falls on this graph, you must adopt one of four distinct global strategies. Let's explore the extremes first.
Let's begin with a scenario where a firm faces very high pressure for local responsiveness, but relatively low pressure for cost reduction. This environment requires a localization strategy.
Local responsiveness means adapting to national and cultural differences. Now, it is easy to think of this just as, changing the language on the packaging. But functionally, culture and infrastructure affect everything: marketing, distribution channels, risk assessment, HR practices.
It is deeply systemic.
And the source gives a famously clear example of this: McDonald's in India.
It is a foundational case study. McDonald's built a global empire on a highly standardized core, offering beef hamburgers and pork products. That was their primary value creation activity.
But taking that exact menu and dropping it into the Indian local market would be a strategic disaster of epic proportions.
Complete failure.
Due to deeply held religious and cultural dietary restrictions regarding beef and pork, a rigid, globally standardized approach would have failed instantly. They would have alienated over 1 billion potential consumers on day one.
So McDonald's was forced to demonstrate immense local responsiveness. They had to fundamentally alter their primary activities. They completely redesigned their product offerings, pivoting to chicken and mutton items, which had massive local demand.
Right.
Furthermore, they introduced a heavily vegetarian menu.
And let's dig into the how of that, because it is not just about printing a new menu. To execute that localization strategy, McDonald's had to completely rebuild their secondary activities in India.
That is the key right there.
They had to build entirely new, separate supply chains for vegetarian products to ensure zero cross-contamination, which is a strict requirement for many Indian consumers. They sacrificed the cost-saving benefits of global standardization to respect the local culture, and that deep adaptation is what made them one of the most successful food brands in India.
Cultural differences are powerful, but the sources highlight that differences in national infrastructure create the exact same pressure for localization.
Oh yes, the telecommunications example.
Yeah.
This illustrates how hardware itself has to localize.
The text details the historical global divergence between CDMA and GSM cellular technologies. In the United States, telecommunications infrastructure was historically built around CDMA technology. In European countries, GSM became the dominant mandated standard.
Okay, so totally different systems.
Yes. A mobile phone engineered with a CDMA antenna is physically useless on a European GSM network.
So if you are a global manufacturer like Nokia, Motorola, or Samsung,
Yeah.
you cannot simply produce one standardized phone in a single mega factory. You are forced to localize.
You have no choice.
You have to run separate R&D and manufacturing lines to offer different hardware that suits the specific technological infrastructure of each region.
And the text adds another layer of complexity by pointing out countries like India, where both CDMA and GSM were widely used simultaneously across different regional carriers.
Oh, wow.
Mobile companies had to innovate even further, engineering dual-compatible phones specifically to adapt to that highly fragmented local infrastructure.
That is the absolute essence of local responsiveness. The core technology has to change for the product to function. The text also mentions distribution channels as a massive driver for localization.
Yes, how you get the product to the customer.
In markets like the US and Brazil, massive supermarket chains dominate retail. Your entire marketing and distribution strategy is built around securing shelf space in those massive stores.
Right.
But in India, due to a vast rural population, local, smaller, fragmented markets dominate. You cannot paste your centralized supermarket strategy onto rural India. You have to localize your logistics to deliver into tens of thousands of tiny kiosks.
So that outlines the localization strategy. High local responsiveness, low cost pressure. Now, let's pivot to the exact opposite corner of the matrix. What happens when a firm faces incredibly high pressure for cost reduction, but almost zero pressure for local responsiveness?
In this quadrant, the firm adopts a global standardization strategy.
Precisely. In this scenario, the firm rolls out the exact same product and marketing strategy worldwide. The fundamental premise here is that there is a unique, uniform pattern of demand across the entire globe for this specific product.
The logic here is brutal but effective. If an enterprise customer in Germany uses the product in the exact same way that a customer in China uses it and a customer in Brazil uses it, why would the company spend hundreds of millions of dollars altering the product or the marketing campaigns for each country?
They simply wouldn't.
Right.
They leverage that uniform global demand to achieve massive economies of scale. By producing one single standardized product in massive volumes, they drive their unit costs down drastically, which satisfies that intense high-cost reduction pressure.
So it is all about volume.
Yes. The source material provides the quintessential example for this: the global electronics and semiconductor market.
Semiconductors, mobile phone processors, laptop screens. An Intel semiconductor chip does not need to be translated into French for the Paris market and Hindi for the Mumbai market.
Yep.
It just needs to compute binary code.
Exactly.
A laptop's LCD screen doesn't require cultural adaptation. Because the functional patterns of demand are absolutely identical globally, firms in these industries pursue aggressive global standardization.
It makes total sense for them.
The R&D costs for a new microchip are so astronomically high, sometimes tens of billions of dollars to build a fabrication plant, that they must sell the exact same chip to the entire planet just to recoup their costs and maximize profitability.
That perfectly illustrates the two extremes. Now, we must explore the most difficult, chaotic quadrant of the strategic matrix. What occurs when a firm is trapped facing high pressure for cost reduction and high pressure for local responsiveness simultaneously?
Man, this sounds like an executive's worst nightmare.
It truly is.
The market is demanding that you be as cheap and efficient as a globally standardized firm, but as customized and culturally adapted as a highly localized firm.
Yeah.
It seems functionally impossible. How do you survive that?
You adopt a transnational strategy. This is a highly complex, carefully balanced hybrid approach. A transnational firm attempts to maintain core product elements and pricing strategies that are globally competitive to achieve those necessary cost reductions, but they simultaneously adapt surface-level features to deal with local languages, habits, and cultural nuances.
Let's try to visualize this. It is
Okay.
like an automotive manufacturer building a globally standardized chassis and engine, the core skeleton of the car that requires the most R&D and manufacturing capital.
Right.
But then the interior, the suspension tuning, and the marketing are highly localized to the specific country. The skeleton is standardized, the skin is localized.
That is an excellent mechanical analogy. Transnational firms rely heavily on developing flexible core products that can be easily adapted in various local markets without re-engineering the foundational technology from scratch. They also rely on immense global brand equity.
And the text specifically notes that they rarely attempt this alone. To achieve that hyper-local responsiveness without bankrupting themselves, they enter local markets in deep coordination with local firms, local contractors, and established business partners.
That is a crucial point.
They leverage existing local expertise rather than building it from scratch, while using their global weight to keep supply chain costs down. The text also mentions two specific concepts that play a vital role here: location effects and experience effects.
Location effects refer to the strategic unbundling of the value chain. A transnational firm will place different parts of its operation in the optimal global location for either cost or quality.
Oh, so splitting it up globally.
Yes. They might put R&D in Silicon Valley for the talent, manufacturing in Vietnam for cost efficiency, and customer service in the Philippines. Experience effects refer to the cumulative cost reductions that occur as a firm learns by doing over time across multiple global markets. Mastering the orchestration of both is essential for a transnational strategy to function.
All right, we have one final strategy to cover in this section: the quadrant where a firm faces low-cost pressure and low pressure for local responsiveness. Compared to the transnational strategy, this sounds almost effortless.
This is categorized as the international strategy. In this model, the firm is highly centralized. A single headquarters in the home country controls the entirety of the worldwide business process.
So they aren't setting up independent manufacturing hubs or localized marketing teams all over the world.
No, not at all. They retain their core R&D activities securely within their home country. They develop the intellectual property at home, they produce the finished product at home, and then they simply export and sell it into international markets via basic distribution channels.
And because their product is so unique, they protect their intellectual property aggressively. The text mentions they protect it through stringent patenting in many countries. And there's a profoundly dramatic historical example provided in the sources that illustrates the power and the danger of this strategy.
Yes.
The pre-1970 patent regime in India.
This is a vital case study for understanding the impact of international strategy on a macro scale. Before 1970, the Indian government allowed for very strong product patents. This regime was incredibly attractive to foreign multinational pharmaceutical firms.
Let's walk through the mechanics of why. If a foreign company holds the patent for a finished life-saving drug, it legally prohibits any domestic Indian firm from reverse engineering it or producing a cheaper generic version.
Right.
It creates an absolute government-enforced monopoly.
Exactly. The foreign drug companies faced local responsiveness pressure. A life-saving cardiovascular drug functions exactly the same in a patient in India as it does in a patient in the US, and they faced zero cost pressure because their patents eliminated all competition. Therefore, they utilized a pure international strategy. They kept all R&D and manufacturing in Europe or the US, patented their drugs in India, and dominated the local healthcare market exclusively through the exportation of their highly priced finished products.
But the text does not shy away from pointing out the dark side of this strategy. Because these foreign firms held an unbreakable monopoly and were just exporting finished goods with no local production, it resulted in astronomically high drug prices.
Devastatingly high.
The text notes this led to massive consumer welfare losses in India, as life-saving medicine was priced far beyond the reach of the average citizen. It is a stark reminder that these are not just abstract textbook theories. These strategic choices have profound real-world consequences.
It is a critical lesson in the sheer power of intellectual property. So to recap the matrix for your exam, localization is high responsiveness, low cost pressure, exemplified by McDonald's adapting to Indian diets and infrastructure adapting to CDMA and GSM.
Yeah.
Global standardization is high cost pressure, low responsiveness, seen in the universal demand for semiconductors. Transnational is the hybrid nightmare of high pressure on both fronts, requiring flexible products and local partners. And international is the highly centralized, export-driven model protected by patents.
We have our strategy. The executives have pointed at the global map and declared, we are pursuing a transnational strategy. But how do you actually arrange the desks?
Right, the logistics of it.
How does the corporate hierarchy, the physical org chart, map onto these complex strategies? If you just hire 10,000 people across 15 countries without a structure, you have anarchy. We need to design the machine.
The sources refer to this architectural phase as alternative organizational arrangements for international operations. There are 4 primary structures a firm can adopt, and each comes with distinct strengths and fatal strategic flaws.
Let's start with the most intuitive one, the international division. If I am a successful domestic company in Chicago and I decide I want to start selling our products overseas, the easiest organizational move is just to create a new department, call it the international division, put a vice president in charge of it, and dump all global activities into that one bucket.
It is the simplest and most common initial approach. The firm sets up functional units or sales offices in different countries, and they all report directly back to this single international division at headquarters.
Okay.
However, for an exam scenario, you must immediately be able to articulate the flaw in this structure as the company scales.
Well, the text is very clear about the friction this creates. If you draw a hard line on your org chart between your domestic business and your international business, you create incredibly dangerous coordination silos. You breed an us versus them mentality.
Precisely. The success of this structure depends entirely on seamless coordination between the foreign units and the domestic divisions sharing R&D, sharing manufacturing capacity.
Which is easier said than done.
Exactly. In reality, isolating the entire global operation into one silo often leads to severe internal conflict. The domestic managers might refuse to alter a product design to suit the international team, viewing them as a secondary priority. They fight over resource allocation and strategic focus, which can ultimately paralyze the overall business.
Okay, so if the international division is too siloed, what if we divide the whole map up? This is the geographic area division.
This structure is explicitly designed to solve those coordination conflicts by decentralizing power. The firm literally divides the world into regional groups. For instance, a North American division, a European division, and an Asia-Pacific division. Each geographical area operates as an independent, largely autonomous entity.
Now, if I'm thinking about the strategic matrix we just discussed, this sounds absolutely perfect for the localization strategy.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. If you have an entire division dedicated solely to the Asia-Pacific region, led by executives based in Singapore, it is incredibly easy for them to identify local consumer market behavior, adapt to local culture, and navigate regional traditions. They live and breathe that specific region.
It heavily favors local responsiveness. But I must challenge you to view this from the perspective of the chief financial officer.
Uh-oh.
If a firm is operating entirely independently in Europe and independently in Asia and independently in North America, well, what happens to the core mechanics of the company's value creation?
The costs would explode.
Bingo.
If Europe operates independently, they're going to build their own R&D labs, hire their own marketing agencies, and build their own manufacturing plants. Then Asia does the exact same thing. You are massively duplicating your efforts in every single region. You are abandoning all of your global economies of scale.
You have identified the fatal flaw. The source text explicitly warns that if a firm is operating under high pressure for cost reduction, the geographic area division structure can be disastrous.
Because it is so expensive.
Yes. The massive duplication of secondary and primary activities destroys the firm's price-cost margin. As the text notes, this inefficiency can cause the firm to run into severe financial losses. It is highly responsive, but incredibly, dangerously expensive.
So we swing the pendulum the other way. What if we divide the company not by where we sell, but by what we actually sell? This is the product or functional division.
In this arrangement, the firm creates worldwide autonomous entities based on specific product lines rather than geography. Let's imagine a massive electronics conglomerate. They create a mobile device division and the home appliance division. Each product division handles its own domestic and international business globally.
And the corporate headquarters just sits at the top, managing the overall capital allocation, overarching strategy, and financial reporting. This structure seems to solve the domestic versus international coordination problem because the VP of the mobile device division manages mobile phones everywhere, in Chicago, in Paris, and in Tokyo. It allows for the rapid, seamless transfer of core competencies and new technology within a product line across the globe.
It is an excellent platform for rolling out new, standardized products internationally because the product manager has absolute authority. But consider the perspective of the regional managers under this structure.
They lose all their power
Pretty much.
because headquarters and the global product managers control all the financial issues and dictate the design strategies from the home country. They strip decision-making autonomy away from the local area managers.
Exactly. The local manager on the ground in Brazil, who knows exactly what the Brazilian market demands, has no authority to adapt the product because the global product manager sitting in New York mandates standardization to keep costs down. It effectively kills local responsiveness.
Which leads us to the final, most complex, and arguably most frustrating organizational arrangement. The attempt to have your cake and eat it too. The global matrix structure.
Ah, yes, the global matrix structure. It is an attempt to merge the high local responsiveness of the geographical area division with the high efficiency of the product division. It abandons the traditional corporate hierarchy. Employees report to multiple managers simultaneously.
Let's walk through a hypothetical scenario to make sure the mechanics of this are crystal clear for the exam, because it sounds like a recipe for corporate civil war.
It can be.
Let's say our firm has 3 geographical regions, the Americas, Europe, and Asia, and it produces 2 products, laptops and servers.
Now imagine you are the mid-level manager responsible for marketing laptops in Europe. Under a rigid matrix structure, you do not simply report to the vice president of Europe, nor do you simply report to the global head of laptops. You report to both of them.
Wait, so I have dual responsibilities. I have to answer to the VP of Europe, who is demanding that I run a highly localized, expensive marketing campaign tailored to German and French consumers.
Right.
But I simultaneously have to answer to the global head of laptops, who is demanding that I use these standardized global marketing assets to cut costs. How does anything get done when your 2 bosses have directly competing incentives?
It is undeniably chaotic and requires massive amounts of management time to resolve those conflicts. However, the sources highlight the immense strategic benefits if the matrix is executed correctly.
Really? How?
The friction is intentional. The matrix structure leads to the incredibly efficient utilization of a firm's resources precisely because experts from different divisions are constantly forced to negotiate, share their opinions, and collaborate.
The text mentions it creates information symmetry among groups.
Yes. In a siloed organization, the laptop division doesn't know what the server division is doing. In a matrix, the dual reporting lines force communication. Everyone knows what everyone else is doing.
Oh, that makes sense.
And ironically, despite having 2 bosses and endless meetings, this forced coordination actually results in the reduction of overall business complexity over the long term. Problems are solved holistically by incorporating both the product perspective and the geographic perspective rather than in isolated silos. It is the ultimate structural attempt to execute the transnational strategy.
We have covered massive ground. We understand the motives of the firm, the anatomy of value creation, the 4 strategic quadrants of global expansion, and the 4 physical organizational structures.
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah, but establishing a global matrix brings us directly into the most practical, terrifying reality for any CEO. How do you actually control this beast?
We must discuss the issues of control.
Let's visualize this. You have successfully built a transnational strategy using a global matrix structure. You have 50,000 employees operating across 20 different time zones. They have dual reporting lines. They're coordinating with local contractors, and they're dealing with massive cultural differences.
It is a lot.
How does the executive suite in the home country actually ensure anyone is executing the strategy? How do you keep the reins on a global empire?
It is a monumental operational challenge. The sheer geographical spread of activities makes controlling an international business exponentially more complex than managing a domestic one. The sources outline 5 distinct control systems that firms utilize, depending on the resources they're willing to commit and the level of autonomy they wish to grant.
Let's start with the most primitive method, personal controls. This is the classic, manager physically standing over your shoulder with the clipboard approach.
It relies entirely on the personal contact and direct observation of subordinates by their direct managers. The text notes this is predominantly utilized by small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, where the limited scale of operations actually allows for direct physical supervision.
But the text is fiercely critical of this method for larger multinational firms. It points out that personal control is inherently highly subjective.
Very subjective.
It is based on the limited interpretation and the potential personal biases of one individual manager evaluating another.
And beyond the issue of subjectivity, it is functionally problematic at a global scale. To exert personal control over 50,000 employees, you must hire thousands of mid-level managers whose sole job is purely inspecting the activities of others.
Which is so expensive.
Exactly. It becomes astronomically costly. Furthermore, from a human resources perspective, it deeply demotivates employees. Highly skilled professionals generally resent excessive, subjective micromanagement of their daily routines.
Nobody thrives when they are constantly being watched. So if we cannot practically observe everyone personally, we attempt to control them with paperwork. We implement bureaucratic controls.
Bureaucratic control operates through rigid written rules, regulations, and strict operational procedures. It establishes definitive, inflexible standards for individuals regarding the scope, duration, and method of their work.
What does that look like in the real world of global business?
It manifests as exhaustive policy manuals, operation guidelines, and most importantly, strict operational budgets and capital spending limits.
Ah, the red tape.
Precisely. For instance, a firm might institute severe bureaucratic rules regarding procurement. A local manager in Germany might have a mandate stating they cannot authorize any expense over $5,000 without obtaining written authorization from 3 sequential levels of management at headquarters. It is control exerted through red tape.
It is undeniably effective at stopping rogue behavior, but it is incredibly rigid. If that German manager sees an immediate fleeting opportunity to secure a local marketing deal, they will lose it while waiting weeks for 3 signatures from the home country.
They absolutely would.
Is there a more sophisticated approach? Something that provides those local managers the autonomy they actually need to respond to their fast-moving markets while still giving headquarters peace of mind?
That requirement leads us to output controls. Instead of policing how the employee executes the work, which is what personal and bureaucratic controls do, output controls judge managers and divisions strictly on their final performance metric.
It's all about the numbers.
Exactly. Headquarters sets a target and they measure the results. They measure overall productivity, profitability margins, market share growth, export volume, or the defect rate of manufactured products.
So it is very clear-cut.
Yes. You can even drill this down to the hyper-individual level, measuring the number of customers served per hour, the number of insurance claims processed per week, or the number of telephone calls resolved in a customer support center.
This sounds significantly more empowering. The text explicitly notes that output control systems give much more power to managers in terms of daily autonomy.
They do.
As long as the German manager hits their quarterly profit target and maintains quality standards, headquarters largely does not care if they take a 2-hour lunch break, how they structure their daily meetings, or what local vendors they use. It provides objective, measurable oversight without the suffocating friction of micromanagement.
Output controls are highly effective, particularly for decentralized structures like the geographic area division we discussed earlier, where local autonomy is paramount. But there is an even more profound, deeply psychological form of control detailed in the sources: cultural controls.
I found this section to be the most fascinating part of the text, because if you think about it, is cultural control basically just a highly engineered way to make employees police themselves?
Essentially, yes. Under cultural control, a firm purposefully develops and painstakingly instills certain shared values, norms, and assumptions across its entire global workforce. It moves beyond operational rules and attempts to govern the social and ethical aspects of the employee's behavior.
Let's explore how that actually functions. Instead of writing a massive bureaucratic rulebook that says, do not steal from the company, do not accept bribes, do not cut corners on safety, you spend years building a corporate culture where profound honesty and extreme safety are such deeply held, shared values that an employee wouldn't even consider violating them, regardless of whether a manager's watching.
Precisely. By deeply embedding these values into the DNA of the organization, a robust system of self-control naturally develops among the employees. They regulate their own behavior and the behavior of their peers to align with the overarching corporate culture.
That is incredibly powerful.
And strategically, the text points out the massive financial and operational benefit of this system-strong cultural control drastically reduces the need for expensive personal managers and rigid bureaucratic red tape. It significantly reduces the monetary and friction costs of managing the firm.
It is the ultimate form of operational efficiency. If everyone truly believes in the mission and the values of the company, you don't need to pay an army of supervisors to watch them. And the sources conclude this section on control with one final, highly practical mechanism that complements the others: control through incentives.
If cultural control is the shared belief system, incentives are the tangible rewards. Firms encourage proper behavior and high performance by offering bonuses, stock options, or cash awards.
It naturally aligns the employee's personal financial goals with the overarching corporate goals. The company sets the output targets, say a specific sales quota or a cost reduction metric, and pays a base salary. But if the employee or the division exceeds those targets, the company pays them a substantial premium.
Which further incentivizes extreme dedication and hard work, and just like cultural control, it fundamentally reduces the need for overbearing personal or bureaucratic oversight. The employees manage themselves because they want the reward.
Okay, we are entering the final phase of this deep dive. We have meticulously covered the internal mechanics of the firm. We know its motives, its global strategy, its organizational structure, and how it controls its workforce.
We have built the whole machine.
The machine is built, it is running perfectly, and it is extracting maximum profit. But there is one final piece of the puzzle that an executive must understand. Section 6 of your material covers global corporate social responsibility, or CSR.
This is a critical concept because a multinational firm does not operate in a vacuum. It interacts continuously with the physical planet and the human societies it touches. What is the corporation's relationship with the outside world?
The sources define global corporate social responsibility as the fundamental social contract between the business corporation, the local and national governments, and the people residing in the societies where the firm operates. Crucially, it notes that this responsibility extends beyond the present moment. It includes a responsibility for the future of that society.
A global corporation wielding billions of dollars in capital possesses immense state-like power. It plays a highly visible and vital role in the economic development of any local society it mentors.
Right.
It builds infrastructure, it pays taxes, and it generates mass employment, all of which elevate local living standards and reduce poverty. But on the flip side of that equation, many industrial and manufacturing business groups heavily exploit local natural resources in their production processes.
And the text points out that the improper or unchecked exploitation of those natural resources can cause severe, sometimes irreversible environmental degradation. This pollution directly and negatively impacts the physical health and economic viability of the local communities.
Exactly.
So CSR is fundamentally about acknowledging and managing the friction between the corporation's mandate for profit and a society's right to health and sustainability.
The source outlines 3 core, non-negotiable principles that form the foundation of global corporate social responsibility. The first principle is sustainability.
This principle is grounded in the hard reality of finite planetary resources. We are talking about raw materials like coal, petroleum oil, natural gas, and iron ore. They exist in strictly limited quantities on this planet.
The core rule of sustainability, as explicitly defined by the text, is that individuals and corporate entities must not utilize more resources than can be naturally renewed or artificially replaced.
So basically, don't use it all up.
Right. The rapid, improper depletion of natural resources severely limits the economic and survival options for future generations. A responsible global firm must engineer its supply chains and production processes in a manner that ensures future generations can also enjoy the benefits of those resources.
It is the concept of not burning down the forest to heat your house for one winter. Use only what can be sustained. It is a powerful mandate that directly impacts how process innovation is directed. What is the second principle?
The second principle is accountability. We have established that a multinational corporation operating in a particular region will generate both positive economic effects and negative environmental or social externalities.
Right.
Accountability dictates that the business must bear full, transparent responsibility for all external or internal damages its operations cause to the local environment and community.
So they cannot simply dump toxic runoff into a local river, maximize their PC margin, and walk away leaving the local government to clean it up.
No, they cannot.
The text states that all business units must actually quantify the specific damages they have inflicted and then take actionable, concrete, financially backed steps for the welfare of the society and the restoration of a healthy environment. They have to internalize the external costs of their impact.
Exactly. They must pay the true toll for their operations. And the third and final principle is the mechanism that ensures the first two actually occur: transparency.
because you cannot be held accountable in secret. The text stresses that all of the external and internal damages to the local environment, as well as the steps taken to mitigate them, must be clearly documented and published in the official public reports of the firm.
That is vital.
Transparency is presented not as a PR exercise, but as an essential, mandatory component of modern global business operations.
It forces the firm to be empirically honest with the public, with the host government, and crucially with its own shareholders about the true, holistic cost of its global operations.
And there we have it. We have traversed the entire landscape of Unit 10. Let's do a rapid-fire strategic recap to lock this into your memory for the exam room.
Sounds good. We began by interrogating the core motives of the firm, the inherent tension between executives pursuing sales maximization for personal and institutional benefits versus the foundational pursuit of profit maximization driven by widening the price-cost margin.
We examined how R&D acts as the ultimate dual-threat tool to push price up through product differentiation and pull costs down through process efficiency.
We dissected the anatomy of value creation, clearly separating the frontline primary activities like production, marketing, and customer service from the vital, enabling backbone of secondary activities like Dell's flawless information systems and global logistics.
And we established that identifying a core competency within these activities is the absolute prerequisite for going global.
We then navigated the treacherous waters of the strategic matrix, balancing the intense opposing pressures of cost reduction and local responsiveness.
That's the 4 quadrants.
Yes. We evaluated the deep cultural adaptation of the localization strategy, the massive economies of scale in global standardization, the complex hybrid balancing act of the transnational strategy, and the monopolistic power of the international export strategy.
We arranged the organizational architecture, analyzing the dangerous silos of the international division, the massive cost duplication inherent in geographic areas, the centralized rigidity that kills local responsiveness in product divisions, and the chaotic but highly synergistic two-boss system of the global matrix.
We examine the harsh realities of keeping that empire under control, comparing the subjectivity of personal management, the red tape of bureaucratic rules, the metrics-driven autonomy of output controls, and the profound efficiency of cultural and incentive-based alignment.
And finally, we grounded the entire strategic enterprise in the social contract of global CSR, built upon the non-negotiable pillars of sustainability, accountability, and transparency.
You are thoroughly prepared for this exam. You understand not just what the concepts are, but how they interact under pressure. But before we conclude, this extensive exploration raises a profound question. A final thought for you, the future executive, to mull over beyond the rigid boundaries of your textbook.
Ooh, let's hear it.
We spent a significant amount of time discussing the immense tension between cost reduction and local responsiveness. We analyzed physical infrastructure, the logistics of shipping hardware, and the staggering costs of duplicating factories in a geographic area division.
Yeah, the physical limitations.
But what happens to this entire strategic matrix as we rapidly transition into a fully digital, AI-driven global economy? What happens when physical resources and mass shipping logistics are replaced by digital products that can be instantly and flawlessly localized by artificial intelligence?
Wow, that fundamentally alters the physics of the matrix. If the marginal cost of distributing a digital product globally drops to essentially zero, does the pressure for cost reduction disappear entirely?
That is the exact dilemma. Will the rigid physical boundaries of geographic area divisions dissolve into the cloud?
It is entirely possible.
Will the global standardization strategy conquer everything because distribution is free? Or will newly empowered digital microcultures demand an even more intense, hyper-localized transnational approach, customized down to the individual user by AI? The chessboard you are studying today is actively changing.
It is a brilliant question, and it proves that the strategic muddy waters are only going to get deeper. To our listener, the MBA student, we wish you the absolute best of luck on your exam. Review the mechanics of these concepts. Remember the PC margin. Remember why McDonald's had to rebuild their supply chain in India.
You are going to do great.
Remember that strategy is not philosophy. It is a series of hard, calculated choices. You are going to crush it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.